What was your biggest that's how that works moment? I bought a car and was worried for months that my oil level never lowered. After 6 months I called my friend who sold me the car to ask about this. He explained that's how it's supposed to work. Then when I realized every single car I owned, and my dad owned my whole life, leaked oil. For a while, my Christmas lights would randomly turn off. I couldn't figure out what it was. Was it the wireless switch? Was it some fault in the electricity? It would seemingly be random, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Then one day I was coming home from work and my neighbors got home at the same time. As they were locking their car doors, my lights turned off. I realized, that's how that works. Edit. It turns out that my car keys also turn off my Christmas lights when I hit the lock button. So maybe it was me all along. Their key fob must be on the same frequency as my wireless switch, and locking the car turned off my lights. I have an air fryer. It's a pretty handy kitchen tool. The food goes in a basket which is attached to what's basically a metal bowl. So the grease and crumbs and whatever fall out of the basket and into the bowl. My only real complaint was it was hard to get the food out without a mess. You try and dump the basket onto a plate and the oil in the bowl still kind of runs out in a puddle. You can keep it away from the food if you're paying attention and wipe it up, but it's an annoyance. Then one day I mentioned it to my wife while making some fries. She just looked at me and said, "Why don't you take them apart?" And took the handle and pressed the button to separate the basket and bowl, dumped the fries out mess free, and reconnects it back to the bowl. Now you might be thinking I'm an idiot for not knowing about that button. It's actually worse. I knew that button was there. I just used it to separate the pieces for cleaning and it somehow never occurred to me to take them apart during use despite the fact it's just one simple button that can be used with one hand. Got a laptop for a job managing a cafe. Worked fine but it was inconvenient to use behind the counter and in the kitchen. After watching me struggle to use it standing up, the owner took it from me, rotated the screen, and flipped it closed. It was a combo laptop/tablet, and I had no idea. How long have you had this thing? 2 months. I feel like, even today, unless you buy the laptop yourself, if someone just gives you a laptop, you'll assume it's just a normal laptop until they tell you otherwise. I certainly wouldn't think to bend the screen way back just to check and see if it might be a combo tablet. Edit. Okay, did not know this was going to blow up. To answer a couple of questions that keep repeating, why not just look up the laptop online to find out? Because I'm not looking. In much the same way I don't look up the specs of the office copier, I just use it. If my boss hands me a laptop to use for work, I just use it until it doesn't work, at which point I then start looking wrap up or go speak to the IT guy/office manager/boss. My job, like in many basic office environments, involves doing my job. It doesn't involve doing any particular research on the PC I'm using to do said job, unless my job requires that. In my situation, that would not be the case. If you have a job that requires a PC with specific specs, then I would see why you might need to do that. Obviously in a non-work environment with my own PC, things would be different, and I'd research the hell out of it. This is not the case here. Just look at the hinge. Got a lot of those comments. This suggests that I'm looking at above. I'm not. But even if I were, looking at the hinge only works if I know what I'm looking for. Having never personally used a combo machine, I'm not sure how useful that would be. When I realized the switch thing on the bottom of the rear view mirror switches it to a darkened reflection. I know someone who was told by his driving instructor that you flick that when someone with bright lights gets up behind you. He worked that over in his head until it became a belief that the switch is there specifically to give tailgaters a hard time. So if someone tailgates you and their lights are too bright, then you flick the switch and it shines them right back in their eyes with such intensity that it punishes them for their behavior. Like the car manufacturer decided to weaponize the rear view mirror. When my brother and I were really little, we had an old family friend who would pick us up by the ears. He would grab each ear, but then would also have us grab onto his forearms. It took me until I was much older to realize that he wasn't actually picking us up by our ears, but instead used his forearms to lift us up. Still a great trick to use with little kids. I just realized this past spring at a party that I've been using corkscrews on wine bottles all wrong. Turns out it is not correct form to screw it in by turning the bottle, then depressing the handles. I was publicly mocked. I deserved it. I'm 29. Bartender here. I didn't realize I was using a wine key / waiter's friend wrong until I saw someone else doing it. I would just screw the corkscrew in, then just yank the cork out by pulling on the horizontally positioned handle. When I saw someone use the lever action properly, I was like, huh, that's why it was so difficult. Just 2 days ago, I learned that the wax in candles is used as a fuel and not as a melting thing to slow down the burning of the wick. Should I mention that I have a chemistry degree? I learned this as a kid of about 6 or so, when I decided I wanted to have a pretend campfire on a plate with a candle. I kept putting little bits of paper and wood chips and such on the melting candle as it spread across the plate, unbeknownst to me as the wood, paper and flames covered the now puddle of burning wax. I realized wax burned, as in on fire, when I went to put the campfire out in the usual manner, with water. Never attempt to put out a fat, oil-based fire with water. Burning balls of flaming fire wax shot everywhere. Walls, it was in a small foyer, and carpet were ablaze. I put out the wall and carpet fires quickly, but the plate was going full tilt. I should have put it out with a pot lid, but instead I opened the front door, grabbed a flat board, kicked the fire plate onto the board, and with the blazing plate on one end of the board and me on the other with outstretched arms ran the fire outside. I should have walked. Running made the flames go back into my face and burned off all my eyelashes, eyebrows and bangs. I actually didn't get paddled. It was the 70s, as I think my parents were of two minds, in that they were glad the house was still standing, and my cherry red face with no facial hair and frizzled head hair were punishment enough. Never knew why some yellow lights seemed to change so fast, and others felt like they took forever. I thought it was just a flat amount of time for everywhere. Then Reddit told me that yellow lights stayed yellow for the speed limit divided by 10 in seconds. So 25 miles per hour speed limit means the light will stay yellow for 2.5 seconds, and 45 miles per hour means it will stay yellow for 4.5 seconds. It all makes sense now. Let me blow your mind some more. The lines between lanes on a multi-lane road go from dash to solid a short distance before each intersection with lights. The distance changes with speed limit too. If you're at the speed limit and you're not at the solid lines, yet when the light turns yellow, you have enough distance to brake safely to a stop without entering the intersection. If you're already inside the solid lines, you should continue through the yellow light. It shouldn't turn red unless the street painters, or more likely, the city planners, were assholes. Edit. Thanks for the silvers, RIP in Barks, etc. This seems to be true of Albuquerque, and possibly other cities here in New Mexico, the state between Arizona and Texas on I-40/Route 66, and between Colorado and Mexico on I-25. It may not be true of your locality or state, or other countries besides the USA, so pay attention to your local intersections. I bought some of those expensive windshield wipers that repel water and they sucked. It would smear the rain and the damn blade kept sliding off. I'd have to get off to fix, put it back on. This went on for 4 to 5 months. One day I went to slide the blade back on, that I realized it wasn't the blade, but the blade cover, that I kept putting back. This happened to me. My dad bought new windshield wipers for his car and just couldn't stop talking about how great they were. I needed a new set, so I bought some for myself. Installed them before a night shift at work, and it was pouring when I drove home the next morning, so hard, people pulled off the highways, because you couldn't see. The whole drive, the damn windshield wipers were awful. Smearing the rain, not clearing the rain really at all. Took me forever to drive home, because it was raining so hard, and I couldn't see. Got home and started to take the piece of crap wipers off, and replace them with the old ones, pulled them out of the trash. and the freaking blade cover comes off as I'm standing in the pouring rain, and all of a sudden, everything made sense. Windshield wipers ended up being amazing, and I still buy that kind of wiper, almost 5 years later. A lot more specific than other comments, but I'll still share. I was a computer science student that was freaking terrible at math. I tested into algebra when I got to college and spent a couple of years slowly working my way up the math ladder to pre-calculus. Meanwhile, I had taken several computer science courses and gotten decent at programming. I still sucked at math and had trouble understanding it until one day in pre-calc when we were learning about matrices. The professor said matrices are used in lots of other fields, notably computer science, where they are known as two-dimensional arrays. My mind immediately exploded. I had no idea how matrices worked, but had done stuff using two-dimensional arrays, and in an instant all sorts of math started to click into place for me, because I realized it had a programming equivalent. Ever since, math has made way more sense to me, and clicked into place much easier for some reason.